Ring Magazine have updated their ratings, and at heavyweight, they have now placed Dillian White above Deontay Wilder in their top 10. As you can see, they've got Tyson Fury as their champion, Anthony Joshua at number 1, Dillian Whyte number 2, and Deontay Wilder at number 3. Now, this is obviously going to cause controversy with the Deontay Wilder fans, but here's my take on it. Dillian Whyte, it could be argued, has a better resume than Deontay Wilder. Now, it took Wilder to actually be destroyed in the rematch with Tyson Fury before Ring Magazine were willing to put Dillian Whyte above Wilder. Now, Dillian Whyte also has one loss on his record, but it was many years ago against Anthony Joshua, whereas Deontay Wilder lost in his last fight, and he lost badly. So I'm assuming that Ring Magazine had to take that into account when they were reassessing their heavyweight top 10. Now, if you look at their records, Deontay Wilder, who is he actually beaten? He had a pretty, let's be real, let's be honest, he had a pretty weak run as WBC World Heavyweight Champion because there were multiple occasions where he could have unified and chose not to. And he really didn't beat anybody elite the entire time he held that WBC strap. So, of course, he won it from Berman Stavern, who was, a solidish heavyweight at a time, but nothing special. Beat Eric Molina, Johan Duopa, Ortis Spilka, a washed-up Chris Arreola, Gerald Washington, Stavern, who was completely shot the second time around. So he'd really done absolutely nothing up until this point. He'd beat nobody of any consequence up until this point. Yeah, some of these guys, I'd go as far as saying they had a pulse, but if you're talking about elite level, these are not exactly head-turning wins, are they? Especially considering the quality of other heavyweights that were out there. There were a number of other top-tier heavyweights who Deontay Wilder could have fought but didn't during this run. So he then faced Luis Ortiz, knocked him out in the 10th in their first fight. Luis Ortiz was really an unknown quantity. Yes, he had a good win over Bryant Jennings, but from the time of recording this video, that was 5 years ago. Or was it more than 5 years now? I forget, but it was a long time ago. So Wilder beat a guy who had a good win over Bryant Jennings, but other than that, Ortiz had nothing on his resume, and I'll come on to Ortiz a little bit later on. Then he had the draw with Tyson Fury, which a lot of people believe he lost. He knocked out Dominic Breazeale, which was a good performance, but is Dominic Breazeale an elite level heavyweight? Wasn't he already knocked out by Anthony Joshua several years earlier? Deontay Wilder surely did it much more quickly, but he had a lot more experience than AJ at the time, so it's horses for courses. Then he rematched Luis Ortiz in a fight that nobody really wanted to see. And Ortiz, to me, looked worse in the second fight than he did in the first fight. Yes, Ortiz was ahead in the second fight, but to me, he just looked slow and ponderous and didn't look as sharp. And that has to be really down to his age. And also the opposition Ortiz had been fighting was less than stellar. So he wasn't really prepared and wasn't as sprightly as he was several years earlier. Back when he fought, when Luis Ortiz fought Bryant Jennings, he was a much sharper operator. So all in all, you look at Deontay Wilder's resume and you think, maybe Dillian Whyte's got a better resume. So if we head on over here to Dillian Whyte's record, his last fight against Mariusz Wach, Wach has really seen better days. Tough guy, very good chin, but he was only ever a fringe contender. He did have a shot at the heavyweight title against Klitschko. And the only thing he proved in that fight really was how incredibly tough his chin is. Mariusz Wach to this day has never been down in a fight. He's been stopped on his feet. He's retired on his stool, but he's never been down. But that wasn't a particularly good performance by Dillian Whyte, who was very overweight. And, it ended up being a bit tougher than it should have been against really an old Mariusz Wach. Oscar Rivas, now that was a good win for Dillian Whyte. Oscar Rivas, previously unbeaten, 26-0, beat Andy Ruiz in the amateurs, was coming off a stoppage win over Bryant Jennings. See, this would have been more like Deontay Wilder fighting Luis Ortiz immediately after the Jennings win. That would have been more comparable to this. Now, Ortiz did a better job on Jennings than Oscar Rivas did. No doubt about it. But still, the point I'm making here is Oscar Rivas is still in his early 30s. He's in shape. He's fast. You know, he had a good amateur background. He's got a nice jab. You know, he's in the prime of his life right now, Oscar Rivas. This is not a washed up fighter. This was an unbeaten fighter. Okay, and that's who Dillian Whyte beat prior to the Mariusz Wach fight. Derek Chisora, well, you know, Chisora is not exactly an elite heavyweight at all, but he did knock him out in good fashion. And Chisora is a guy who, even though he's not elite, on his day, when he's sufficiently motivated, he'll give a lot of heavyweights a tough time. I mean, we saw that in the Vitaly Klitschko fight, his first world heavyweight title tilt. Prior to that, Dillian Whyte, of course, beat Joseph Parker. And it could be argued that Joseph Parker is better than anybody Deontay Wilder has on his resume. Joseph Parker, a former world champion, fast, athletic, you know, decent amateur career as well. You could easily say that Joseph Parker is better than anybody Deontay Wilder has beaten. I'm not talking about Tyson Fury because Deontay Wilder never beat Tyson Fury. Dillian Whyte did beat Joseph Parker. He also beat Lucas Brown, who was kind of a world champion before he got stripped. Robert Helenius, etc., Malcolm Tanner. These are some of his earlier fights. And of course, going back to the Anthony Joshua fight, which he lost. So you could certainly make a case that Dillian Whyte has got a better resume than Deontay Wilder. Now, when it comes to resumes, you do have to take into account what a fighter has done lately. And that also pertains to the Ring magazine ranking Tyson Fury above Anthony Joshua. Okay? Because somebody can have a great resume, but if they've been fighting tomato cans for the past 2 years and their good wins over elite opposition were 3, 4, 5 years ago, then you can't really count what they did 3, 4, 5 years ago if they've only been fighting cans for the past 2 years. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, you don't completely discount it. You don't totally discount it, but you kind of knock some points off if they've been fighting cans for the past 2 years. Yeah. So that is one thing you have to take into account. And again, you look at Deontay Wilder, are his past few wins, the Ortiz rematch, Dominic Brazil, Ortiz again, are they stronger than, let's say, Dillian Whyte, Wach, Rivas, Chisora, Parker? You know, some people could argue one way or the other. But if you're being fair and objective, you won't really grumble too much with Dillian Whyte being just one place ahead of Deontay Wilder in the Ring magazine rankings. You won't grumble too much. If you're being fair and objective, you'll say, okay, these two are interchangeable. I can see an argument for Dillian Whyte being there. I can see an argument for Deontay Wilder being there, but you're not going to get too mad about it. Okay? So I've got no issue with this at all. It is what it is. Dillian Whyte has got a number 2 spot with the Ring magazine. So this might be the first time in boxing history when the Ring magazine have their top 3 heavyweights as all British fighters. It may be the first time in Ring magazine history. If any of you out there are boffins or historians, you let me know. But I can't remember a time in the past when Ring magazine have had 3 British heavyweights as their top 3 in the world. So yeah, pretty interesting and maybe historic stuff. Now, as far as Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, again, it's a similar kind of argument, although Tyson Fury hasn't had many world title fights. That's the thing. He's only had 2 world title fights. Excuse me, 3. 2 world title fights. He had the Klitschko fight and the 2 Wilder fights. So he's only had 3 world title fights. Anthony Joshua, on the other hand, how many world title fights has he had? Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's had 9 world title fights as opposed to just 3 for Tyson Fury. And he's fought some good men. You know, Andy Ruiz, a tough guy. I'm not going to say he's elite, but he's a tough guy. Gave Joseph Parker a real close run. Many people to this day swear blind that he was robbed in the Parker fight. Alexander Povetkin, a proven fighter, only 1 loss to Klitschko, Olympic gold medalist, you know, good wins under his belt. He did hold a version of the world title at one stage. Joseph Parker was unbeaten at the time, WBO heavyweight champion. Carlos Takam at the time, a real tough contender. And of course, Vladimir Klitschko, right, who was a Hall of Fame heavyweight. Yeah, he'd been out the ring for a bit, but he'd been training the whole time because he was supposed to go into that rematch with Tyson Fury. He was in great shape. AJ took him out. So overall, AJ's got more top-level wins than Tyson Fury. But here's the thing that I spoke about just a few moments ago. It's not just about your overall resume. You have to consider what the fighters have done lately. You know, like the old Janet Jackson song, "What have you done for me lately?" Well, Tyson Fury lately destroyed Deontay Wilder. Yeah, he had 2 easier fights against unheralded opposition prior to that, you know, in between the 2 Wilder encounters. But that Wilder fight and the way he just destroyed him for the WBC strap, you do have to give him some extra points, not just for the win, but the way he went about the win in the United States as well. And Tyson Fury is a British fighter. Tyson Fury is also still unbeaten. So you take that into account, the fact that he absolutely wiped the floor with Wilder in the rematch. And you also take into account his fantastic win over Vladimir Klitschko several years ago. And again, long time ago, 5 years, but then he wipes out Wilder more recently. And then you compare that to Anthony Joshua, who did get knocked out last year by Andy Ruiz. So even though he was on a good run and he has more, legit top level wins than Fury does, he had a blip, and you have to take that blip into account. And again, it's not just how many top level fighters Anthony Joshua's beaten compared to Fury, but it's the way they did it. Tyson Fury's 2 best wins over Klitschko and against Wilder were dominant wins. Whereas Anthony Joshua, you could say he was dominant against Andy Ruiz. Yeah, he looked a bit gun shy at times and, a little nervous, which you can understand. But Andy Ruiz was not a reigning WBC World Heavyweight Champion like Wilder, nor was he a 10-year reigning unified champion like Klitschko. So although he dominated him on the scorecards, it wasn't the most confident looking Anthony Joshua you have ever seen. So you got to take that into account as well. As the fact that Ruiz wasn't as proven as the 2 other fighters I mentioned. Again, Povetkin's a good win and what have you, these fights before, but that blip has to be taken into account. And the other wins, as I say, Klitschko, yeah, he beat Klitschko. It was a great fight, but he didn't dominate Klitschko the way Fury did. He did manage to stop him and Fury didn't, but AJ hit the canvas and he was in all kinds of trouble in that fight, So I get it with placing Tyson Fury above AJ. It's more what Fury has done lately, that making up for the fact he's only had 3 world title fights. AJ more world title fights, but he's looked shaky lately. See, these are the things you have to, or at least these are the things I would take into account if I was to do a top 10. And I'm not really into top 10s and, rankings and all this kind of stuff. But just analyzing the Ring Magazine rankings, I can understand why they put Fury above AJ. Now, you could make a case for AJ and say that he should still be the Ring Magazine champion. I wouldn't, get mad at somebody who wants to make a case for it. I get it. But you can also make a case for Fury given recent form of both men. Now, as far as the rest of the top 10, I reckon it's pretty solid, to be honest with you. The only person I've got an issue with in terms of their placement in this top 10 is Luis Ortiz. There is no way on God's green earth that Luis Ortiz should be number 4 in these rankings, or number 5 if you count Fury as number 1. There's no way that Luis Ortiz should be above Andy Ruiz. Andy Ruiz beat Anthony Joshua last year. A fight which Luis Ortiz turned down, by the way, for career high money. Andy Ruiz took that fight and he knocked Anthony Joshua out. Luis Ortiz doesn't have anyone even remotely close to the quality of Anthony Joshua in the win column on his resume. So, and remember that Ruiz win over AJ was last year. Luis Ortiz's best win was Bryant Jennings, who's nowhere near as good as AJ, 5 years ago. So how on earth Ring Magazine can justify putting this guy above Andy Ruiz is beyond me. I've got no idea what that's all about. Then you've got Povetkin. Now, Povetkin hasn't exactly been fighting or beaten, hasn't exactly been beating cream of the crop heavyweights over the past couple years. Yes, he put up a good effort against Anthony Joshua, was very competitive for a couple rounds, actually hurt AJ in the first round. He beat Hughie Fury. He had a draw with Michael Hunter. So, he's had mixed form over the past couple years, and he's obviously an older guy, just like Luis Ortiz. Now, overall, Povetkin's had a better career than Ortiz. There's just no question and no doubt about it. He's had a much better career. Overall, better wins. There's more depth in his resume. He did hold a version of the world title at one stage. And his last, the draw with Michael Hunter, is that better than anything Luis Ortiz has done in the past 5 years? Probably. Prior to that, he beat Hughie Fury. Is Hughie Fury better than anybody Luis Ortiz has beaten recently? Hughie Fury is no great shakes, no disrespect to the guy. Is Hughie Fury better than Christian Hammer, Travis Kaufman, Razvan Kajanu? An argument could be made that he may be. Would you pick Hughie Fury against all these guys? Probably. So, as I say, I have no idea how the Ring magazine can put Luis Ortiz at number 4. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I think that these two guys should be above him. No doubt, Andy Ruiz and Povetkin. Joseph Parker should probably be above him as well, although Joseph Parker's opposition of late has been poor. So he lost to Anthony Joshua. He then lost to Dillian Whyte. And who's he fought since? What has he done since? He's been fighting journeymen and what have you. So, yeah, Parker has a weaker claim maybe than these two. He was a former world heavyweight champion. So if you were going to make an argument that Ortiz should be above any of these guys below him, you could make an argument with Parker, although I'd probably say Parker still deserves to be above Ortiz. In fact, maybe Ortiz just needs to be like number 9 or 10 or something, or maybe number 8, because could you say Ortiz is more proven than Rivas? Yes. Could you say he's more proven than Pulev? In fact, Pulev, I'm not even sure who needs to be above who in terms of Pulev and Rivas. I would say if Ortiz was number 8, I wouldn't really grumble with Michael Hunter above him. And, you look at Michael Hunter and the people he's beaten. He has been beating better people than Luis Ortiz has been beaten over the past couple of years. There's just no question about it. He has. Sergey Kuzmin is better than anybody Ortiz has beaten over the past couple of years. Is Sergey Kuzmin better than Bryant Jennings, better than a prime Bryant Jennings? I don't know. Maybe Bryant Jennings could have beat Sergey Kuzmin. But, he beat Kuzmin. He had a draw with Povetkin. He beat Martin Bakole. I'm going to say that Martin Bakole is better than anybody Luis Ortiz has fought in the past couple of years. Some people might disagree. That's cool. But I think at a bare minimum, you would have to put Luis Ortiz at number 7. More realistically, number 8. And, you could probably say he deserves to be above Rivas, maybe Pulev. Pulev had some decent wins in the early part of his career. He did beat Derek Chisora, to be fair, but that was several years ago, wasn't it? That was a decent win as well. Beat Hughie Fury. He was never champion. He got destroyed by Klitschko when they fought. He managed to hurt him in the first round with a jab, but Pulev's kind of a funny one. After the Klitschko fight, his level of opposition, other than Chisora, was not the best. And he didn't seem keen. He had several opportunities to fight Anthony Joshua. Didn't seem keen previously. Hopefully he gets it on with AJ this time. So, yeah, that's the only real gripe I have with the top 10 is where they've put Luis Ortiz. I think they're being far too generous to this guy. I don't think he is worthy of a number 4 spot or number 5 spot, depending on how you want to look at it. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Again, I'm sure there are going to be some Deontay Wilder fans who are desperately unhappy with the fact that the Ring magazine have ranked Dillian White above him. And at the same time, there may be some Anthony Joshua fans who are desperately unhappy that Tyson Fury has been ranked above him. Although I strongly suspect that the Wilder fans are going to be by far the loudest and most upset with these rankings. So anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about these heavyweight rankings here, with Fury being above AJ and Dillian White being above Deontay Wilder. Just looking through some of these tabs I've still got open to see if there was anything else I needed to address. Yeah, of course, Michael Hunter, draw with Povetkin, Kuzmin, Maldonado, that's just a journeyman. Ustinov, another journeyman. But Martin Bakole, these are good wins over the past 2 years against Kuzmin and Bakole. And the draw with Povetkin, I personally think he did enough to beat Povetkin, but I don't know whether the Ring magazine would take that into account. And what's this? Yeah, Luis Ortiz's record. As you can see, there's literally nothing on there at all in terms of wins. You'd have to go all the way back to Brian Jennings in 2015 to find a win that actually meant anything. And this is, okay, this is just the heavyweight rankings overall. Anyway, people, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about these rankings and everything I've mentioned in this video. It's happening, I'm out.